Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and agree to S. 3304, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 3304, an act to increase the access of persons with disabilities to modern communications and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin by commending Chairman Boucher of the subcommittee for his incredible work on this issue, along with Chairman Waxman, who dedicated a lot of time to making sure that this piece of legislation would come to fruition here this evening. I'd also like to thank Chairman Stearns, Ranking Member Stearns, on the minority side, along with Mr. Barton, the Ranking Member of the full committee, Mr. Burgess, and all of the minority members. This bill is, if you look it up in the dictionary, the words bipartisan effort. This bill's number would be next to that effort. On July 26th, the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the House passed by an overwhelming bipartisan margin of 348 to 23 the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act that I'd introduced last year to update the ADA for the digital era. On August 5th, the Senate passed the companion bill by unanimous consent, and then on September 22nd, the Senate unanimously passed a bill to make technical corrections to its companion bill. We are now taking up both of these bills and will send them after passage to the President to be signed into law. If you're an individual who's blind, deaf, or both, navigating an intersection can be a challenge, but navigating the Internet can sometimes be even more difficult. And that's because laws to ensure equal treatment for Americans with disabilities have focused primarily on things like wheelchair access rather than web access. That is about to change. At this historic moment, I'd like to think that Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan are looking down on us here tonight and smiling. This picture was taken in 1888 in Brewster, Massachusetts on Cape Cod. Whether it's a Braille reader or a broadband connection, access to technology is not a political issue. It's a participation issue. Each of us should be able to participate in the world to its fullest extent possible, and the latest communications and video devices and services can enrich and ennoble how Americans experience and enjoy their lives. Coming out of the Energy and Commerce Committee's Telecommunications Subcommittee over the last 2 decades have been a whole series of legislative initiatives aimed at broadening access for Americans who are disabled to technologies that can help them do things that most of us take for granted. In 1990, we made sure that Americans who are deaf could make telephone calls. Around the same time, 1990, we mandated that television shows be closed captioned for the deaf so that they can enjoy the same entertainment and other programming as other Americans. Many deaf and hard of hearing people say that closed captioning is the single modern accessibility technology that has changed their lives the most. And in 1996, in the Telecommunications Act, we inserted language which required accessibility of all telephone equipment, including telephones, telephone calls, call waiting, speed dialing, caller ID, and related services. 20 years ago, the ADA mandated physical ramps into buildings. Today, individuals with disabilities need online ramps to the internet so that they can get to the web from wherever they happen to be. From the time of Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan through the Americans with Disabilities Act to closed captioning for television programming and ability of the deaf to make telephone calls, and now to the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act on the floor tonight, we've made important progress. We've moved from Braille to broadcast, from broadband to the BlackBerry. Annie Sullivan used special language she spelled in Helen Keller's palm. In the 21st century, we've moved from tracing letters of the alphabet on a palm to navigating the Palm Pilot. And we must ensure that all of these devices are accessible to the deaf and the blind in our society. That's what this legislation does here this evening. Annie Sullivan was an incredibly dedicated and determined teacher. Now technology needs to be the teacher, the constant companion providing instruction and access to the world and opportunities that otherwise would be out of reach. Helen Keller did learn to speak, and Helen Keller is still speaking to us tonight about how all of us should make the most of our abilities and participate in society to the fullest. But we need the technologies to make that possible, being made accessible to each American. The bill we are considering tonight significantly increases accessibility for Americans with disabilities to the indispensable telecommunications and video technology tools of the 21st century by making getting on the web easier through improved user interfaces for smartphones, enabling Americans who are blind to enjoy TV more fully through audible descriptions of the on-air action, making cable TV program guides and selection menus accessible to people with vision loss, providing Americans who are deaf the ability to watch new TV programs online with the captions included, mandating that remote controls have a button or similar mechanism to easily access the closed captioning on broadcast and pay TV, requiring the telecom equipment used to make calls over the internet is compatible with hearing aids, and for low-income Americans who are deaf and blind, providing a share of the total of $10 million per year of funding to purchase accessible internet access and telecom services so these individuals can more fully participate in our society. I thank my colleagues for their support for this landmark legislation, and at this time, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the Speaker for the recognition. This bill will help Americans with hearing and vision disabilities, or those who have both, allow them access to 21st century communications and technology, and prohibit the Federal Communications Commission from mandating proprietary technologies, relying instead on advisory committees and industry-developed technical standards. The members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, on a bipartisan basis, supported this legislation when it moved through committee in the House in July. I want to commend my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for working with the minority and all of the stakeholders to get a consensus. Because of that work, the bill originally passed this House by a vote of 348 to 23. We are now considering the Senate version in an effort to move the bill quickly to the President. Unfortunately, the version from the other body originally included a number of significant technical errors. To fix those errors, the other body passed Senate Bill 3822 to make corrections to their work. As corrected, S 3304, like the House bill, includes language explicitly stating that the new provisions of the law shall not be construed to require every feature and function of every device or service to be accessible for every disability. Furthermore, the law will create goals rather than impose technology mandates, which will allow innovation in this area to flourish. In that same spirit, it allows manufacturers and providers to rely on third-party solutions in order to achieve accessibility for people with disabilities. However, all businesses and their products are not created equal. This bill recognizes that some small businesses and fledgling entrepreneurs may not be able to bear the financial burden of these new requirements, so there is the possibility of exemptions for small businesses. The legislation also contemplates waivers for some multifunction devices that are not primarily designed for advanced communication, and as well as authorizes the Federal Communications Commission to grant waivers to address concerns of the electronics community about very small devices. I again want to thank the majority for working together on this bill. I wish the rest of the legislation that has been considered in this Congress could have been dealt with in such a collaborative process. With that, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support the bill and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I thank the chair, and again, I yield myself as much time as I may consume, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on S 3304.
Without objection.
I thank the chair very much. This bill has been several years in the making. It's going to have a transformative effect on the lives of the deaf and the blind in our country and ultimately in the world, because the technologies we develop here will help all of the deaf and blind be able to use information in this wireless world that all information is now migrating to. I want to thank Roger Sherman, Tim Powderly, Sarah Fisher, Amy Levine. On the Democratic side, Neil Freed and Will Carty on the Republican side for their great work. To Colin Kroll on my staff for many years, who helped to conceptualize what it is that we're doing today, and especially to Mark Baer on my staff, who has worked tirelessly over the last year and a half to bring this bill to fruition. Looking down, I think, and smiling right now on this legislation are Karen Pelt-Strauss, Rosaline Crawford, Jennifer Simpson, Eric Bridges, Mark Rickert, Larry Goldberg, Steve Rothstein at the Perkins School, and Mike Fester at the Carroll School. Incredible advocates and the conscience of this issue, why we're here. I thank all who worked on this legislation. I urge an aye vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas.
Further request for time, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 3304? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.